The hangman's noose swayed empty in the Texas wind that October morning of 1878, and Wade Lancaster figured that rope would have suited him just fine if God had any sense of justice left in this world. He rode into Hecla with dust caking his throat and guilt weighing heavier than the saddlebags on his mare. The town sprawled across the scrubland like a collection of sun-bleached bones, all weathered wood and faded paint that spoke of harder times and harder men. Wade knew he belonged among them. 3 years since Martha died giving birth to their stillborn son, and he had been half-living ever since, drifting from ranch work to cattle drives, never staying anywhere long enough to feel the full weight of what he had lost. The main street stretched before him, lined with the usual establishments. A general store, a saloon with its painted sign peeling in long strips, a blacksmith's forge already sending up sparks despite the early hour. At the far end stood a white church with a steeple that pointed accusingly at heaven. Wade had stopped talking to God the day they buried Martha, stopped believing in much of anything except the next day's work and the burn of whiskey when the nights got too long. He guided his horse toward the livery stable, noting the clusters of townspeople gathered in tight knots along the boardwalk. Their voices carried an edge of excitement, that particular hunger people got when they had fresh scandal to chew on. Wade had seen it before in a dozen towns just like this one. He kept his head down, wanting no part of whatever drama was unfolding. The livery owner, a bent old man with tobacco-stained whiskers, took Wade's horse with barely a word. Wade paid for a week's board, hoping the ranch job he had heard about would pan out. He needed work, needed the mindless exhaustion that came from long days under the sun, needed anything to fill the hollow space inside him. As he stepped back onto the street, a woman's voice cut through the morning air, high and desperate. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." Wade's boots stopped of their own accord. He turned toward the sound and saw the crowd had grown thicker near the church. Through the gaps between bodies, he caught glimpses of a woman in a faded green dress, her dark hair falling loose from its pins. She stood at the church steps, and above her loomed a man in black, his posture rigid with righteous fury. "You have brought shame upon yourself and this community," the man declared, his voice carrying the practiced boom of a preacher used to filling every corner of his sanctuary. "The Lord has no place for harlots within his house, nor do his faithful people have a place for you in this town." Wade should have kept walking. This was none of his business, just another piece of small-town cruelty that played out everywhere from Texas to Montana. But something in the woman's voice, the ragged edge of hope being shredded, made him pause. "I made a mistake," the woman said, and Wade could hear tears thickening her words. "But I have repented. I have prayed. Please, Reverend Michaels, you know my family. My mother attended this church for 20 years before she passed." "Your mother was a God-fearing woman who would weep to see what you have become," the Reverend shot back. Several people in the crowd murmured agreement. "You lay with a married man, Emma Oakes. You destroyed a family with your wanton behavior. There is no redemption for such sin within these walls." Emma. Wade filed the name away as he watched her shoulders curl inward, watched her try to make herself smaller under the weight of all those judging eyes. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, still young enough that this moment might define the rest of her life. "The church council has voted," Reverend Michaels continued, clearly enjoying his moment of authority. "You are no longer welcome in Hecla. I suggest you take yourself to one of the larger cities where women of your moral character congregate. Perhaps San Antonio. I hear there are establishments there that would suit you well." The crowd laughed, a ugly sound that made Wade's jaw tighten. He knew what the Reverend was implying, knew the path he was trying to force this woman down. If she left Hecla branded as a fallen woman, with no references and no family, her options would be severely limited. Women ended up in brothels for far less. Emma lifted her chin, and Wade saw the defiance flash in her eyes even as tears streaked her cheeks. You call yourself a man of God, but you show no mercy. You preach forgiveness every Sunday, but you offer none. Judge not, lest ye be judged, Reverend. Those are Christ's words, not mine. Do not quote scripture at me, you Jezebel. The Reverend's face flushed red. You have until sundown to leave this town. If you are still here when darkness falls, the sheriff will escort you to the county line personally. The crowd began to disperse, the entertainment over. Emma stood alone on the church steps, her carpetbag at her feet, looking lost in a way that Wade recognized too well. He had felt that same untethered sensation after Martha died, like the world had cut him loose, and he was just floating through empty space. He should walk away. He had his own demons, his own grief to manage. Taking on someone else's troubles was the last thing he needed. But his boots carried him forward anyway, moving through the thinning crowd until he stood at the base of the church steps. Emma's eyes met his, wide and wary. Up close, he could see the fine bones of her face, the exhaustion that shadowed her features. She was pretty in a quiet way that would be easy to overlook, but her eyes held intelligence and a spark of determination that the Reverend had not quite crushed. You looking for work? Wade heard himself ask. She blinked, confusion replacing some of the fear. What? I just bought a small spread about 5 miles west of here, he lied, the story forming as he spoke. Previous owner died, left the place in rough shape. I need someone to help with cooking and cleaning while I get the ranch operational. Pay is not much, but it includes room and board. This was insanity. Wade did not own a ranch. He barely had $50 to his name and a job prospect that might not even materialize. But the words kept coming, building a fiction that might save this woman from whatever fate awaited her. Emma's throat worked as she swallowed. You do not even know me. I know enough. Wade picked up her carpetbag before she could protest. Name's Wade Lancaster. You can call me Wade. We can work out the details on the ride out to the property. Wait. She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. Why would you do this? No one helps without wanting something in return. Wade met her gaze steadily. Maybe I am just tired of watching so-called righteous people kick others when they are down. Maybe I actually need the help. Does it matter? She searched his face for a long moment, and Wade wondered what she saw there. Whatever it was, it must have satisfied her because she slowly nodded. My name is Emma Oakes, and I am a hard worker, I promise you that. Then we have a deal. Wade started walking toward the livery, Emma falling into step beside him. Behind them, he could feel eyes watching, could hear the whispers starting up again. Let them talk. He had stopped caring about other people's opinions the day he buried his wife and son. The livery owner gave them a knowing look when Wade said he needed his horse back and asked about renting a wagon. That is the Oakes girl, the old man said, working a wad of tobacco in his cheek. You know what she done? I know she is going to help me fix up my place, Wade replied evenly. That is all I need to know. The old man shrugged and spat into the dirt. Your funeral. That will be $2 for the wagon rental, $3 if you want it for the week. Wade paid for the week, watching his funds dwindle further. He helped Emma onto the wagon bench, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Hecla, Emma sat rigid beside him, her hands clutched in her lap. They were a mile out of town before she spoke. You lied back there. You do not have a ranch, do you? Wade kept his eyes on the dirt road ahead. No. Then where are we going? I heard about a job at the Crawford Ranch, about 7 miles west. Owner is looking for a foreman and hands to help with a cattle drive up to Dodge City. I was planning to ride out there this morning anyway. So you have no job and no property, but you just took responsibility for feeding and housing me." Emma's voice was flat. "That is either the kindest or the stupidest thing anyone has ever done." Despite himself, Wade felt his mouth quirk. "Probably both." Emma was quiet for another minute. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. It was a brittle sound, edged with hysteria but genuine. "Lord help me, I have thrown my lot in with a crazy man. Seems like crazy is better than what you were facing back there." Her laughter died. "You do not know what I did. What they said about me, it is true. I did lay with a married man. I did not know he was married when it started, but I found out and I did not stop it right away. I was weak and stupid and I hurt people. The Reverend was not wrong about that." Wade guided the horse around a deep rut in the road. "We all have things we regret, things we wish we could take back, but that does not mean you deserve to be thrown to the wolves. Why do you care? You do not know me." "My wife died 3 years ago," Wade said, the words coming easier than he expected. "Childbirth. The baby did not make it either. For a long time after, I was not really living, just going through the motions. Then one day I realized I had a choice. I could let that grief turn me into something hard and mean, or I could try to find some way to make something good come from all that pain. Today, helping you, maybe this is me trying." Emma turned to look at him fully. "I am sorry about your wife, about your child. Me too." Wade kept his focus on the horizon, where heat shimmered above the scrubland. "Point is, I have made my share of mistakes too, we all have. Does not mean we stop deserving basic human decency." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking, the sun climbing higher. The Crawford Ranch materialized in the distance, a sprawling collection of buildings centered around a large main house. Cattle dotted the pastures, and Wade could see men working near the corrals. "When we get there," Emma said quietly, "what do I do? Stay close and let me do the talking. With luck, they will hire me on and we can figure out the rest from there." The ranch foreman turned out to be a weathered man named Dixon, who looked Wade over with the practiced eye of someone who had hired and fired more cowboys than he could count. They stood in the shade of the barn while Emma waited by the wagon, trying to make herself invisible. "You have experience with cattle drives?" Dixon asked. 5 years' worth. Worked drives from South Texas all the way to Kansas. Know how to handle myself with livestock and difficult terrain." Dixon nodded slowly. "We are short-handed. Lost 3 men to better pay up north and another to a horse accident. Boss wants to move 1,500 head to Dodge before winter sets in. It is hard work, long days. I am not afraid of hard work. Pay is $30 a month plus food. We leave in 2 weeks, be gone about 2 months." Dixon glanced at Emma. "That your wife, my housekeeper?" The lie came smoothly now. "She was helping me pack up before I headed this way. I will need to make arrangements for her before the drive. You can bunk in the ranch house with the other hands until we leave. As for the girl," Dixon scratched his jaw, "Crawford's wife could use some help. Their regular cook just quit to get married. If the girl can cook and keep house, Mrs. Crawford might take her on temporary while you are gone. Can she cook?" Wade honestly had no idea. He looked at Emma, who straightened her spine and walked over to join them. "I can cook," she said firmly. "My mother taught me. I can make bread, stews, roasts, pies, preserves. I can clean and mend and manage a household. If Mrs. Crawford gives me a chance, I will not disappoint her." Dixon looked between them, clearly trying to work out their story. "Fine. I will take you up to meet Mrs. Crawford, but I am telling you straight, she does not tolerate any nonsense. This is a respectable household." "I understand," Emma said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Mrs. Crawford turned out to be a sturdy woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to Dixon's explanation, then fixed Emma with a penetrating stare. "What is your name, girl?" "Emma Oakes, madam." "You have references?" Emma's composure wavered. "No, madam. My mother passed 2 years ago and I have been working independently since then." "Where are you from?" Wade watched Emma's hands twist in her skirt. "Originally from Hecla, madam." "Hecla is only a few hours away. Why are you looking for work out here?" The moment stretched taut. Emma could lie, but Wade could see Mrs. Crawford was the type who would see through it. Sometimes the truth, or a version of it, worked better. "I had some troubles in town," Emma said quietly. "Made some mistakes that cost me my reputation. I am not a bad person, Mrs. Crawford, but I am a fallen one in their eyes. I am looking for a fresh start and a chance to prove I am more than my worst moment." Mrs. Crawford was silent for a long beat. Then she said, "Show me your hands." Emma held them out. Mrs. Crawford examined them, turning them over to see the calluses and rough patches that came from hard work. "These are not the hands of someone afraid of labor," Mrs. Crawford said. "Can you make biscuits?" "Yes, madam." "Can you manage a kitchen with minimal supervision?" "Yes, madam." "Can you handle ranch hands who might not show you proper respect?" "I can hold my own, madam." Mrs. Crawford nodded. "I will give you a trial period. 2 weeks while the men prepare for the drive. You will cook 3 meals a day for the household and the hands. That is usually about 12 men, plus myself and my husband. You will keep the main house clean and handle the laundry. In exchange, you get a private room, meals, and $15 a month. If you work out, we can discuss keeping you on after the drive returns. If you do not, you leave with no hard feelings and I will write you a reference for the work you did complete." "Fair." Relief flooded Emma's face. "More than fair. Thank you, Mrs. Crawford." "Do not thank me yet. You have not worked a day, Dixon. Show her to the spare room off the kitchen." "Girl, you can start with getting supper on the table. We eat at 6 sharp." As Emma followed Dixon toward the house, Mrs. Crawford turned to Wade. "That is a complicated situation you have brought to my doorstep." "Yes, madam, it is. But she is a good person who made some mistakes." "Same as any of us." "You are either a fool or a saint, Mr. Lancaster. Time will tell which." Mrs. Crawford's expression softened slightly. "But I remember what it is like to need a second chance. My husband gave me one 30 years ago when no one else would. I suppose I can pay that forward. Just make sure that girl knows this is her last chance. If she causes trouble here, there will not be another opportunity. She understands, and thank you for taking the risk." Wade spent the rest of the day settling in with the other ranch hands, a mix of weathered cowboys and younger men trying to make their way in the world. They eyed him with the usual wariness that came with a new addition, but Wade had worked enough ranches to know how to handle himself. He kept his head down, did more than his share of work, and spoke only when spoken to. That evening, he joined the others filing into the ranch house dining room. The long table was set for 12, and the smell of food drifted from the kitchen. When Emma emerged carrying a steaming pot of stew, Wade noticed several of the younger hands sit up straighter, their eyes following her movements. She had cleaned up, her hair now properly pinned, her dress still worn but neat. She moved efficiently, placing the pot on the table along with fresh bread, butter, and a platter of roasted vegetables. Mrs. Crawford watched from the head of the table, her expression neutral but assessing. The meal was simple but good, the kind of solid cooking that working men appreciated. Wade caught Emma's eye once as she refilled the water pitcher, and she gave him a small, tentative smile. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it did something strange to his chest, made something that had been frozen for 3 years shift slightly. After supper, Wade helped carry dishes to the kitchen despite protests from the other hands that it was not a man's work. He found Emma at the sink, her sleeves rolled up, already working through the mountain of plates and pots. "You did well tonight," he said quietly. She glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face. "Mrs. Crawford has not said anything yet. She will. That woman does not strike me as someone who holds back criticism. If she had complaints, you would have heard them by now." Emma returned her attention to the dishes. "Thank you. For today, for all of it, I know you put yourself in a difficult position for a stranger. We are not strangers anymore." Wade picked up a towel and started drying the plates she washed. "We are business partners now. You are going to be cooking for me for the next 2 months once we get on the trail." "About that?" Emma's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What happens after the drive, after you get paid and I have been here 2 months?" It was a fair question, one Wade had been turning over in his mind all afternoon. "I guess we figure that out when we get there. Maybe you like working here and Mrs. Crawford keeps you on permanent. Maybe you decide you want to move to a bigger town where no one knows your past. Maybe something else entirely. Point is, you will have options. That is more than you had this morning." Emma nodded slowly. "I have not had options in a long time, not good ones anyway." They worked in comfortable silence until the dishes were done. As Wade headed back to the bunkhouse, he found himself looking forward to breakfast, to seeing Emma's face across the dining room. It was a dangerous thought, he knew. He was not looking for anything except honest work and enough exhaustion to keep the nightmares at bay. Getting attached to anyone, especially someone as complicated as Emma, would only lead to more pain. But logic had never been particularly good at governing matters of the heart, even one as damaged as Wade's. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Wade worked from dawn to dusk helping round up cattle, checking gear, and ensuring everything was ready for the drive. Emma proved herself in the kitchen, turning out meals that had even the most skeptical ranch hands praising her cooking. Mrs. Crawford, true to her practical nature, added an extra $1 to Emma's monthly pay after the first week. Wade saw Emma mostly at mealtimes, but those brief encounters became the parts of his day he anticipated most. She had a dry sense of humor that emerged once she felt safer, and sometimes he would catch her laughing with Mrs. Crawford in the kitchen, the sound bright and unburdened. One evening, 5 days before the drive was set to leave, Wade found Emma sitting on the back porch after the dishes were done. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for a world that held so much hardness. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She patted the step beside her. "It is a free porch." Wade settled down, keeping a respectable distance between them. They sat without speaking for several minutes, watching the light fade. "I never thanked you properly," Emma said finally. "For what you did. You saved my life that day in Hecla. I know that sounds dramatic, but it is true. I had nowhere to go, no money, no prospects. The Reverend made sure everyone in town knew what I had done. If you had not stepped in, you do not need to thank me." "Yes, I do." She turned to face him, and the fading light caught in her eyes. "You gave me back my dignity. You gave me a chance to prove I am more than my mistakes. That is worth more than I can say." Wade felt heat creep up his neck. "I just pointed you toward a job. You stood up for me when no one else would. You lied to help me. You put your own reputation on the line for a complete stranger. That is not nothing, Wade." Hearing his name on her lips did something to him, made him want things he had locked away after Martha died. Anyone decent would have done the same, but no one else did, just you. Emma's hand found his on the step between them, her fingers lacing through his in a gesture that felt both innocent and terrifyingly intimate. I want you to know that means something. It means everything." Wade knew he should pull his hand away. This was not appropriate, was not smart. Emma was vulnerable and grateful, and he was her employer in a sense. But her hand was warm in his, and the touch made him feel more alive than he had in 3 years. "Emma, I need to tell you something." The words came hard. "When I help you, I am not expecting anything. Not gratitude, not affection, not anything beyond honest work. I need you to know that. I do not want you to feel obligated to me." She was quiet for a moment, then she squeezed his hand gently. "I know, I can see that about you. You are a good man, Wade Lancaster, a truly good man. That is rare." They sat together until full darkness fell, and Mrs. Crawford called from the kitchen that she needed Emma's help with something. As Emma stood, she looked down at him with an expression he could not quite read. "When you come back from the drive, we should talk," she said. "About what happens next. About options." "Okay," Wade managed. "We will talk." He watched her go, his hand still tingling where she had touched it, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. This was dangerous territory, but Wade was finding it harder to care about the risks. The morning of the drive dawned clear and cold. Wade had his gear packed and his horse saddled before the sun broke the horizon. The cattle were already stirring, restless with that animal sense that change was coming. 1,500 head of longhorns, bound for Kansas and whatever price they would fetch in Dodge City. Emma appeared at the bunkhouse door as Wade was doing a final check of his saddle. She held a cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled of fresh bread and bacon. "For the trail," she said, pressing it into his hands. "It will not last long, but it is better than what you will be eating most days." "Thank you." Wade tucked the bundle into his saddlebag. Around them, the other hands were mounting up, their voices carrying in the still morning air. He knew he should just say goodbye and ride out, but he found himself hesitating. "Be careful," Emma said. "I have heard stories about cattle drives, stampedes and storms and river crossings. I have done this before. I will be fine. Still." She stepped closer, then reached up to adjust his collar, her fingers gentle against his neck. "Come back safe. I will be here when you return." "Emma." Her name came out rough. "Do not wait for me. If you get a better opportunity, something that will give you a real future, you take it. Do not put your life on hold for a maybe." She met his eyes, and he saw determination there mixed with something softer. "I know what I am doing. Just come back." Before Wade could respond, Dixon called out that they were moving. Wade touched his hat in farewell, then swung into the saddle. As the massive herd began its slow trudge northward, he looked back once to see Emma standing in front of the ranch house, her hand raised in goodbye. The drive north was every bit as grueling as Wade remembered. 18-hour days in the saddle, eating dust and sleeping on hard ground. They crossed rivers swollen with early winter rains, chased down cattle that tried to break from the herd, and weathered 2 vicious storms that had the longhorns stamping and bawling in terror through the night. Wade threw himself into the work, pushing his body past exhaustion each day so that sleep came quick and dreamless. But Emma crept into his thoughts anyway, especially during the long hours of night watch when there was nothing to do but circle the herd slowly and listen to the cattle breathe. He thought about her laugh, about the way her hands moved when she cooked, about how she had held his hand on the porch that evening. He thought about Martha too, and felt the familiar guilt rise up. Was he betraying her memory by developing feelings for someone else? Martha had been his whole world, and when she died, he thought that part of him had died too. But here he was, 3 years later, thinking about a woman with dark hair and kind eyes who had been through her own kind of hell and come out still fighting. One night, about 6 weeks into the drive, Wade was sitting by the campfire with some of the other hands. One of them, a young man named Tommy, started telling stories about his sweetheart back home. "Going to marry her soon as we get back," Tommy said, his face soft with youth and optimism. "Saved up enough for a small place, going to build her the kind of life she deserves." Another hand scoffed. "You are too young to be thinking about settling down. You have not even seen any of the world yet." "Maybe I have seen enough to know what matters," Tommy shot back. "A good woman, honest work, a place to call home. That is all I need." Wade found himself nodding. It was a simple dream, but there was nothing wrong with simple. Sometimes simple was exactly what a man needed after too much complication. Dixon, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. "Lancaster, you were married before, right? What is your advice for young Tommy here?" All eyes turned to Wade. He took a sip of his coffee, choosing his words carefully. "I was married for 4 years. Best 4 years of my life. If you have found a good woman who loves you and you love her, hold on to that with everything you have. Nothing else matters more. Not money, not adventure, not pride. Just love and showing up every day to choose that person again." "Even though your wife passed, you do not regret it?" Tommy asked. Wade thought about Martha, about the laughter they shared and the plans they made, about the grief that nearly destroyed him when she died. "Not for a second. I would rather have had those 4 years with her and lost her than never have loved her at all." The conversation moved on, but Wade sat with his words, testing them for truth. He had loved Martha with everything he had, and when she died, he thought that was the end of his story. But maybe it was just the end of a chapter. Maybe he was allowed to write more pages, to find something new while still honoring what he had lost. They reached Dodge City 2 months almost to the day after leaving the Crawford Ranch. The town sprawled across the Kansas plains, rough and rowdy with cattlemen and cowboys fresh off the trail looking to spend their earnings. Dixon handled the sale while the hands helped process the herd through the stockyards. The cattle fetched a good price, $28 a head, which put Crawford in a generous mood. When Dixon distributed pay, he added an extra $10 to each man's wages as a bonus. Wade pocketed his $70, more money than he had held at once in a long time. "We will rest here 3 days," Dixon announced. "Then we head back. Those of you who want to stay in Dodge, no hard feelings, but you are on your own for transportation home. Those riding back with us, stay sober enough to sit a horse." Wade spent the 3 days taking baths, eating food that did not taste like campfire smoke, and trying to avoid the worst of Dodge City's temptations. Some of the hands disappeared into saloons and brothels, but Wade found he had no interest. He just wanted to get back. The ride south seemed longer than the drive north had been, probably because they were not managing cattle and could cover more ground each day. Wade found himself getting restless as they drew closer to the Crawford Ranch, second-guessing everything. What if Emma had moved on? What if she had just been grateful that day? Nothing more. What if he was reading feelings into the situation that were not really there? But when the ranch finally came into view on a cold December afternoon, Wade saw a figure emerge from the main house. Even at a distance, he recognized Emma's silhouette, the way she moved. She stood on the porch, one hand shading her eyes, watching the riders approach. Wade dismounted in front of the house, his legs stiff from days in the saddle. Emma walked down the steps, her pace controlled until she was 3 feet away, and then she closed the distance quickly, throwing her arms around his neck. "You came back," she said against his shoulder, and he realized she was crying. Wade held her carefully, very aware of the other hands watching and smiling. "I told you I would." She pulled back, swiping at her eyes with an embarrassed laugh. "I am sorry, I just worried. There were stories about a bad storm that caught some of the herds. We made it through fine." Everyone came back safe. Mrs. Crawford appeared in the doorway, her expression as stern as always but with a glint of approval in her eyes. "Well, do not just stand there, Lancaster. Come inside and eat something that does not have trail dust on it. Emma has been cooking since dawn, preparing for you boys to return." That evening's meal was a celebration, with roasted chickens and fresh vegetables and pies that made the hands groan with appreciation. Wade sat across from Emma, unable to stop looking at her. She caught his eye several times, and each time she blushed and looked away, but she was smiling. After dinner, when the dishes were done and the other hands had retired to the bunkhouse for cards and whiskey, Wade found Emma on the back porch again. It had become their place somehow in the 2 weeks before the drive. "I missed you," Emma said without preamble. "I know I should not say that, I know it complicates things, but it is true. The days felt longer without you here." Wade's heart hammered against his ribs. "I thought about you on the trail, more than I should have, more than I expected to. What did you think? That you are brave, that you are strong, that you deserve better than what life has given you so far." He paused, gathering courage. "That I want to be the one to give you better if you will let me." Emma turned to face him fully. In the lamplight spilling from the kitchen window, her face was luminous. "Wade, I need to know something. When you look at me, you see someone you want, or someone you are trying to save." It was a fair question, one that deserved an honest answer. Wade thought about it, really thought about it. "At first, maybe I just wanted to help because it was the right thing to do. But Emma, somewhere along the way that changed. Now when I look at you, I see someone who makes me laugh. Someone who is not afraid to work hard or speak her mind. Someone who has been through hell and came out with her kindness intact. I see someone I want to build a life with if you would want that too." Emma's breath hitched. "I have a past. People will talk. There will always be whispers about what I did, about the married man I was with. Can you live with that? With knowing people will judge you for being with me?" "I stopped caring what people think a long time ago. The only opinion that matters is mine, and I think you are worth 100 of them." Wade reached for her hand. "I am not perfect either, Emma. I am still grieving my wife. Part of me probably always will be. I cannot promise I will never have hard days where I am not fully present. But I can promise I will try. I will choose you every day and do my best to make you happy. If that is enough, then I want to try this." "It is enough." Emma's voice was thick with tears. "It is more than enough. I want to try too." Wade pulled her close, and she came willingly, folding into his arms like she belonged there. He rested his chin on top of her head, breathing in the scent of soap and bread and something indefinably Emma. For the first time in 3 years, the hollow space in his chest felt like it was beginning to fill. "We should probably do this properly," Wade said. "Court like respectable people. Let me take you to dinner in town, maybe go to a dance." Emma pulled back to look at him, her eyes dancing. "Wade Lancaster, are you asking permission to court me?" "I am. What do you say?" "I say yes. I say absolutely yes." They stood together on the porch as winter stars appeared overhead, holding hands and making plans. Wade knew there would be challenges ahead. Emma's past would follow them, and his grief would flare up at unexpected moments. But for the first time since Martha died, he felt hope. Real, genuine hope for a future that held something more than just getting through each day. The next morning, Wade sought out Mr. Crawford in the ranch office. The older man looked up from his ledgers, his weathered face creasing into a knowing smile. "Let me guess. You are not moving on to the next job." Wade shifted his weight. "Actually, I was hoping to stay on here, work as a regular hand. I know the drive is over, but if you need someone for the winter, I would like to stay. Does this have anything to do with a certain young woman in my kitchen?" There was no point in lying. "Yes, sir. I would like the chance to court Emma properly, build something with her, but I need steady work to do that. Crawford leaned back in his chair, studying Wade. Emma has been good for my wife. First time in years I have seen her take to someone like she has with that girl, but I need to know your intentions are honorable. They are, sir. I want to marry her eventually if she will have me, but I want to do things right. Give her time to be sure, make sure we are building something that will last. You were married before. Yes, sir. My wife died in childbirth 3 years ago. Crawford nodded slowly. My wife and I could not have children. It was a source of pain for many years. But we built a good life anyway, the two of us. Sometimes the family you make is different than the one you planned, but it is just as real. He paused. I can use another hand. Winter work is mostly maintenance and caring for the breeding stock. Pay is $25 a month plus room and board. But Lancaster, if you hurt that girl, you will answer to my wife, and trust me when I say that is a reckoning you want to avoid. Wade could not help but smile. Understood, sir, and thank you. Over the next few months, Wade and Emma built their relationship in the small moments between work. Wade would help her carry water from the well, and they would talk about everything and nothing. Emma would pack extra food in his lunch pail with little notes tucked inside. On Sundays, they would walk along the creek that ran through the Crawford property, their hands linked, talking about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Emma told him about growing up in Hecla, about her mother's illness and death, about the loneliness that led her into the arms of a man who lied about his marital status. Wade told her about Martha, about the baby they lost, about the dark months after when he could not see a path forward. Do you think she would approve? Emma asked one day as they sat by the creek. You're Martha. Do you think she would want this for you? Wade had thought about this a lot. Martha always said life was too short to waste on regrets. She made me promise when we got married that if anything ever happened to her, I would not shut down. She wanted me to live fully, to find joy where I could. He looked at Emma. I think she would like you. I think she would be glad I found someone who makes me want to try again. I wish I could have met her. Me too. You both had that same fire, that refusal to let the world make you small. I think you would have been friends. As winter gave way to spring, Wade knew he was ready to take the next step. He had saved most of his wages, and one trip to town he visited the small jewelry shop and bought a simple gold ring. It was not much, but it was honest work honestly paid for, and he hoped that would matter more than the size of the diamond. He planned to propose on Emma's birthday in April, but plans changed when Mrs. Crawford fell ill with pneumonia in late March. For 2 weeks, Emma barely slept, nursing the older woman through fever and chills while still managing the household. Wade helped where he could, sitting with Mrs. Crawford so Emma could rest, fetching the doctor from town. When Mrs. Crawford finally turned the corner and began to recover, she called Emma and Wade to her bedside. I am not a sentimental woman, Mrs. Crawford said, her voice still weak but her eyes clear. But these last weeks have shown me that life is uncertain. Emma, you have been like a daughter to me, and Wade, you have proven yourself to be a man of character. If you two are planning to marry, you have my blessing. More than that, I want you to do it soon while I am here to see it. Wade looked at Emma, saw the tears in her eyes, saw the answer there. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. I was planning something more romantic, he said, dropping to one knee beside Mrs. Crawford's bed. But maybe this is better. Emma Oakes, you walked into my life when I thought my heart was dead. You made me believe in second chances, in hope, in love after loss. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me and let me spend every day trying to make you as happy as you have made me? Yes, Emma whispered. Yes, absolutely yes. Wade slipped the ring onto her finger and Mrs. Crawford clapped her hands together weakly. "Finally, some good news in this house. Now you will need a dress, Emma. I have one in my trunk from when I was younger. It should fit you well enough with some alterations." They were married 3 weeks later in the Crawford ranch parlor, with the ranch hands and neighbors in attendance. Even the Reverend from Hecla had not been invited, much to everyone's satisfaction. Instead, they found a traveling preacher who agreed to perform the ceremony with no questions asked about Emma's past. Emma wore Mrs. Crawford's altered dress, a simple cream-colored gown with lace at the collar. Wade wore his best shirt and trousers, his boots polished to a shine. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Emma softly, tasting salt from her happy tears. That night, in the small cabin Crawford had given them as a wedding gift, Wade and Emma lay together as husband and wife. Wade was gentle, mindful that Emma's only previous experience had been with a man who had used and discarded her. But Emma met him with eagerness and trust, and their joining was sweet and tender and full of promise. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Emma traced patterns on Wade's chest. "I never thought I would have this," she said quietly. "A good man, a real marriage, a place where I belong. The day you walked up those church steps in Hecla, I thought my life was over. But it was really just beginning." Wade caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You saved me too, you know. I was just drifting, half alive, waiting for something I could not name. You gave me a reason to want more, to be more. So we saved each other. I guess we did." They built a good life together over the next years. Wade continued working for Crawford, eventually becoming the ranch foreman when Dixon retired. Emma became an essential part of the ranch operations, managing the household and taking on more responsibilities as Mrs. Crawford's health remained fragile. A year after their wedding, Emma told Wade she was pregnant. The joy was immediate and overwhelming, but so was the fear. Wade could not help but think of Martha, of how pregnancy had stolen her from him. Emma saw the shadow cross his face and took his hands firmly in hers. "I am not Martha. Every pregnancy is different. We are going to be okay." "I cannot lose you," Wade said, his voice breaking. "Emma, I cannot go through that again." "You will not. I am strong and healthy, and we have the doctor close by. We are going to have this baby, and we are going to be a family. Trust me." It was the longest 9 months of Wade's life. He hovered over Emma, driving her crazy with his constant concern. But she tolerated it with patience and humor, understanding where his fear came from. In February of 1881, on a cold morning with snow falling outside, Emma went into labor. Wade sent for the doctor and then paced the cabin like a caged animal while Mrs. Crawford attended Emma. The hours dragged past, and with each cry from the bedroom, Wade died a little. But then, finally, he heard a different sound. A baby's cry, strong and healthy and alive. Mrs. Crawford emerged from the bedroom smiling. "You have a son, and Emma is fine. Tired, but fine." Wade stumbled into the bedroom to find Emma propped up on pillows, holding a small bundle. She looked exhausted but radiant, her face glowing with accomplishment and love. "Meet your son," she said, pulling back the blanket. Wade looked down at the tiny face, the small hands curled into fists, and felt something crack open inside him. All the fear, all the grief he had carried for so long began to drain away, replaced by a love so fierce it took his breath. "He is perfect," Wade managed. "You are perfect." "Thank you, Emma. Thank you for this gift." They named him William, after Emma's father who had died when she was young. Little William thrived, growing chubby and content on Emma's milk, filling the cabin with his gurgles and cries. Wade discovered that fatherhood suited him in ways he had not expected. He loved teaching William to smile, to grasp his finger, to recognize his voice. Emma would often find Wade standing over the cradle at night, just watching their son sleep, making sure he was breathing. "He is fine," Emma would whisper, pulling Wade back to bed. "You do not have to watch him every moment, I know. I just cannot believe we get to keep him, that he is really ours." 2 years later, Emma gave birth again, this time to a daughter they named Mary. The birth was easier, and Wade was calmer, able to trust that Emma was strong enough to bring their children safely into the world. Their little cabin became too small for a family of 4, so Crawford helped Wade build a larger house on a piece of the ranch property. It was not fancy, just 4 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs. Emma made it a home with curtains and rugs and the kind of warmth that came from love and laughter. Years passed in the good way that they do when life is full. Wade and Emma raised their children, worked hard, and built their place in the community. The whispers about Emma's past faded as people saw the life she had made, the mother and wife she had become. When William was 7 and Mary was 5, the Crawfords passed within months of each other, Mrs. Crawford first and then her husband, as if he could not bear to be without her. They left the ranch to Wade and Emma, a final gift from 2 people who had believed in second chances. It was overwhelming and terrifying and perfect. Wade and Emma worked side by side to keep the ranch running, hiring hands and making improvements, always mindful of the legacy the Crawfords had entrusted to them. One evening, when Wade was 42 and Emma was 39, they sat together on their porch watching William and Mary chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Emma leaned against Wade's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Do you ever think about that day in Hecla?" Emma asked. "When you walked up those church steps, sometimes, it feels like a different life now. Do you ever regret it, taking on a fallen woman with nothing to offer?" Wade turned to look at his wife, at the lines that had appeared around her eyes and mouth, all of them earned through years of laughter and work and life well lived. "You gave me everything, Emma. A family, a purpose, a reason to believe in hope again. That day I helped you was the luckiest day of my life. I think we were both lucky, maybe, or maybe it was just 2 broken people finding each other at exactly the right time." Emma smiled and kissed him softly. "I love you, Wade Lancaster. I love you too." As darkness fell and their children came running up the porch steps, breathless and grass-stained and happy, Wade felt a contentment that went bone deep. He had been a lonely cowboy once, adrift and grieving, convinced his best days were behind him. But Emma had changed everything, had shown him that life held more than just pain and loss. She had become his greatest blessing, and every day he thanked whatever force had guided his boots up those church steps in Hecla all those years ago. He had walked towards someone in need, and in helping her, he had saved himself. Over the next decade, the ranch prospered under Wade and Emma's management. They expanded their herds, improved their breeding stock, and earned a reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle. William grew into a serious young man who loved working with the animals, while Mary inherited her mother's warmth and her father's steady determination. As their children grew, Wade and Emma made sure they knew the whole story of how their parents met. They did not shy away from the difficult parts or pretend Emma's past had not happened. Instead, they used it as a lesson in grace, in second chances, in the power of choosing to see people's potential rather than their mistakes. "The measure of a person is not in never falling," Wade told his children. "It is in how they get back up. Your mother fell once, but she got back up with courage and dignity. That is why I love her." When William was 18, he asked his father how he knew Emma was the right woman to marry. Wade thought about it, remembering that desperate young woman on the church steps, remembering the journey that had brought them to this moment. I knew because she made me want to be better. Because when I was with her, the world seemed a little less dark. And because she saw me, the real me, broken and grieving, and she did not try to fix me. She just stood beside me while I healed myself. "That is what I want," William said. "That kind of love. Then wait for it. Do not settle for less. Real love, the kind that lasts, it is worth waiting for." William took that advice to heart, and when he was 21, he married a schoolteacher from Abilene named Sarah. Mary followed suit 3 years later, marrying a rancher's son from a neighboring property. Both weddings were joyful affairs, with Emma crying happy tears and Wade's chest swelling with pride. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations, but Wade and Emma remained its heart. Even as they grew older, grayer, slower, they were always together. Wade still helped his wife carry water even when it made his back ache. Emma still packed extra food in his lunch with little notes, even though they had been married 40 years. They became the love story people pointed to, the proof that second chances were real and lasting happiness was possible even after devastating loss. Young couples would come to them for advice, and Wade and Emma would sit on their porch and share the wisdom earned through years of choosing each other every single day. "Marriage is work," Emma would say, "but it is the best kind of work, the kind that builds something beautiful." "And it is about forgiveness," Wade would add. "Not just forgiving your partner, but forgiving yourself for not being perfect. We are all just doing our best." On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration. The whole community turned out, filling the ranch with music and laughter and love. Wade and Emma danced together slowly, their bodies moving in the familiar rhythm they had perfected over 5 decades. 50 years, Emma said, her head on Wade's shoulder. "Who would have thought? I would have. From the moment I put that ring on your finger, I knew we would go the distance." "Liar. You were terrified I would change my mind," Wade chuckled. "Okay, maybe a little, but I hoped, and hoping turned out to be enough." As the evening wound down and their guests began to depart, Wade and Emma found themselves alone on their porch once again. It had become their sanctuary over the years, the place where they processed the joys and sorrows of life together. "You have any regrets?" Wade asked, taking Emma's hand in his. Their skin was thin and spotted now, hands marked by age and work, but they fit together perfectly. "Not a single one. You? Only that I did not have more years with you. 50 is not enough. I want 50 more." Emma laughed softly. "We will take what we get and be grateful for it. That has always been our way." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one overhead. The night was cool but not cold, perfect for sitting outside and counting blessings. "Wade." "Yes, love. Thank you for saving me that day, for seeing something in me worth saving." Wade turned to his wife, his partner, his greatest blessing. "Emma, you saved me just as much. We saved each other. That is what love does." She smiled and squeezed his hand. "Then I am glad we loved each other." "Me too. Every single day, me too." They remained on the porch until the moon rose high and full, casting silver light across the ranch they had built together. Inside, their house held the memories of 50 years, the laughter and tears and ordinary moments that had woven their lives into something extraordinary. Wade thought back to that lonely cowboy who had ridden into Hecla so long ago, convinced his life was essentially over. He had been so wrong. Life had not ended when Martha died. It had just been waiting, holding its breath, for the right moment to begin again. And it had begun again on a church step, with a desperate woman and a man who still believed in doing the right thing, even when it cost him. From that small act of defiance against cruelty, They had built an entire world. A family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. As they finally rose to go inside, Wade pulled Emma close one more time, breathing in the scent that had become as familiar as his own. "I love you, Emma Lancaster. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago." "I love you too, Wade, and I would say yes again every single time." They walked into their home together, hand in hand, just as they had done for 50 years. And as the door closed behind them, the porch sat empty but warm, holding the echo of their love like a blessing on the Texas night. Years continued to pass gently. Wade and Emma grew even older, their hair white as snow, their movements slower but their love undiminished. They sat together every evening on their porch, watching sunsets and counting grandchildren and great-grandchildren, marveling at the family they had created. Wade passed first, in his sleep at the age of 78, with Emma beside him holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for the life we built together." Emma followed him 6 months later, her heart simply deciding it was time to be with her husband again. She died peacefully, surrounded by family with a smile on her face. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their matching headstones bearing simple inscriptions. Wade Lancaster, beloved husband, father; friend Emma Lancaster, beloved wife, mother, blessing at their funeral. Their grandson stood to speak about the legacy they had left. He told the story of how they met, of the lonely cowboy and the scorned woman who found each other when they both needed saving. He spoke of the life they built through hard work and dedication, and love that never wavered. "They taught us that our past does not define us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That second chances are real. That love is a choice we make every single day. They showed us what it means to truly see another person and choose to stand beside them no matter what. That is the legacy they leave us, not just this ranch, but the example of how to love well and live fully." The ranch stayed in the family for another 3 generations, each new steward aware of the story behind it. The house Wade built was preserved, the porch maintained, and every Lancaster child grew up hearing about the day their great-great-grandfather walked up the steps of a church in Hecla and changed 2 lives forever. Sometimes on quiet evenings, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of 2 voices on that porch, talking and laughing, planning and dreaming, loving each other through words and silence and the simple act of choosing to be together. Wade had taken in a woman the preacher scorned, and she had become his greatest blessing. But the truth was deeper than that. They had become each other's blessing, 2 broken people who found wholeness together. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate sorrows, creating a love that lasted beyond their lifetimes. It was a legacy worth having, a story worth telling, a love worth remembering. And in Hecla, though the town changed and modernized and barely resembled the place it had been in 1878, there remained one reminder of that day. The church still stood, its white paint fresh and its steeple still pointing skyward. A new generation of preachers preached there, most of them kinder than Reverend Michael's had been. And sometimes, wedding couples would ask to take their photos on those church steps, not knowing the significance of that particular spot. But they would stand there, holding hands and smiling, and somehow the love that had begun there all those years ago would seem to bless them too. Because that is what real love does. It does not just change the lives of those experiencing it. It ripples outward, touching everyone it encounters, proving again and again that kindness matters, that second chances are possible, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the most unlikely packages. Wade and Emma had proven that. They had lived it, breathed it, built an entire existence around that truth. And long after they were gone, their story remained, a testament to the power of choosing love over judgment, hope over despair, and grace over condemnation. It was a simple story, really. A lonely cowboy and a desperate woman, meeting at the exact right moment. But from that simple beginning grew something extraordinary, something that would outlast them both and inspire generations to come. And that, perhaps, was the greatest blessing of all.